everybody, welcome to our cookie decorating time together. My name is Denise, I'm the owner of D is for Delicious, and I can't wait to decorate St. Patrick's Day cookies with you. So before we get started with our kit, why don't you grab just a few things. First of all, wash your hands, because we're going to be handling our cookies. Grab something to put on your surface, maybe a piece of parchment paper, table covering, even a baking sheet would work just fine. And then some toothpicks would be great, a pair of scissors, and some napkins or paper towels, because we can get sticky doing this. So grab all those items, and then why don't we come back and get into our kit. There are some fun colors inside here and some fun cookies, and what I would like for you to grab out of this kit is this practice sheet, and choose a color of icing. We're gonna use one color to practice holding the piping bags, and we're going to practice following along the lines on this. So the way that I would like for you to trim this piping bag is to trim off just a bit. It's always easier to trim off more than trim off too much when you begin. So I'm gonna trim off just a little bit, just a little snip, enough to just cover the lines. All right, now let's talk about how to hold this. I'd like for you to put the hand you write with at the top of the piping bag. That's gonna do most all of the work. That's going to squeeze and apply the pressure so the icing will come out in one solid flow. Your other hand really doesn't do much. It just might hold your paper steady or even just guide the tip along. Now, when I cover these lines up with the icing, I'm not going to touch the tip of the bag to the surface. I'm actually just going to hover above and drag it along. All right, so let's practice. So we're squeezing with our right hand and we're just hovering above that line. When you get to the end of the line, you press down and you pull up. So at that moment I end the line, I release pressure and pull up in one solid motion. So let's go over those lines. I just love for you to get the feel for how the icing flows. I'm gonna roll up my other sleeve. If you have your sleeves down, it might be helpful to pull them up. So let's just practice getting the feel for how to control our icing. Those were straight lines. This one is a little bit more challenging because you're moving. All right, now we're gonna move on to the squiggly line. So this just requires some control. Again, your icing is following along where your hand is guiding it. It's like a roller coaster. Now, if at any point as you're working, you notice that your line is like breaking apart, sometimes that happens if our bag is not trimmed enough, and also that could happen if your pressure on your bag changes. So try and keep the same pressure, the same amount of squeezing at the top of the bag. I'm just squeezing really gently to get the icing to come out. So let's move on to our circles. These are a challenging shape to do. If you're noticing that this is tricky, you are not alone. Circles are so challenging. Just do your best. We're just practicing. And I think it's great to practice. Even if you've decorated cookies before, doing this practice sheet is a good warm-up. Great for your hand control and hand strength. I hope you're feeling more comfortable using your piping bag as you get to the end of your practice sheet. if I'm moving along too fast, please just pause the video and keep going on your practice sheet. It's so important to practice all of these lines before we move on to the cookies. All right, so when we're finished with the practice sheet, we can just put that aside. You're all done with that. Let's get out all our other supplies. So you have 6 cookies inside. You can trim those right out of the cellophane bag. Get those cookies out in front of you. There's 6 different shapes. See if you can identify what they are. I know depending on how you hold the cookie or look at the cookie, it can really look like different things. So you have 2 shamrocks in your set, 1 4-leaf clover, 1 3-leaf clover. We have a pot of gold. We have a shamrock shake. So this one is a cookie cutter that we're gonna flip upside down. So you might recognize it as an ice cream cone. That's what the cookie cutter is we used. But I like to flip it upside down and make it a leprechaun. And then we have a little rainbow with 1 cloud right here. All right? So why don't we set these in front of us? I'd love for you to set the shamrocks in front of you and the rainbow. We're gonna set those 3 in front of us first. I'd like to start with those. They have more of a simple design element to them. And I'd also like you to get out your other piping bags and we're gonna trim those up. So the way that I'm going to show you, first of all, I'm just gonna show you with certain colors. You can use creative freedom and use whichever colors you'd like. You don't have to do it the same way I'm going to. So with that in mind, I'm not trimming my black right now because I'm gonna use this more for detailing later. So I'm just setting that one aside without trimming it. However, if you would like to use black for outlining or anything along the way, go ahead and trim that. And the other bags I'm going to trim just as I did with that first bag that I used on the practice sheet. Not too much, I'm just trimming off a bit, because we're going to do our cookie decorating in 3 separate steps. So the first step in cookie decorating is to do our outlining. The second step is to do our flooding. And then the third step is where we do the detailing and put all the little touches on. So I'm going to show you how I will outline the cookies to make them look like our practice set or like the demonstration set right here. And if you have any other ideas on color schemes or patterns you'd like to use, please have fun and just go with it. Whatever you're feeling led to do, just take it and run. And I meant to mention the other 2 items in your kit are your sprinkle cups, which we'll use a little bit later, and 2 extra piping bags, which we'll also be using a little bit later. So you can just set all those things aside. All right, so on our shamrocks, you can choose any colors you'd like. I'm going to do the same colors that I did in my set, just so they match, and I can show you how to create that set that is in the photograph. So when you outline your cookie, you are going to try and have your piping icing go as close to the edge of your cookie as you can without going over. So choose to start wherever you'd like. I'm just gonna start right here. And I'm just following along the shape of the cookie. I want my icing to stay on my cookie without going over. If you're not happy with any of the lines you make, let's say the icing slips off the cookie a little bit, go ahead and use that toothpick that you have beside you, swipe it off, and start again. This is the time to fix any mistakes or any lines you're not satisfied with. It's easy to just swipe off the icing and start again. All right, so moving on, I'm gonna do the other shamrock in a light green, just for fun. The edge of the shamrock really reminds me a lot of a heart. As you repeat that pattern, doesn't it seem like the top of a heart? we go. And I'm gonna move on. I'm allowing these lines to dry a little bit before I flood them. So that's what's going on over there. All right, so on the rainbow, I'm going to create the cloud first. I'm just going to create these swirly areas here to represent the cloud. And then in this portion of the rainbow, I'm going to create 3 different sections. I'm going to have this top area be for a green area. And you can choose any colors you'd like to use. I'm going to have the middle part be the light green. And I'm going to have the farthest area here as white. I think orange would look really pretty on here too. Take it and run with it. But notice how I created all those areas. I'm planning ahead so that I can flood all those areas in the next step. So after I've just outlined these, I'm actually done with these cookies, and I'm going to very carefully, just using a finger, I'm going to push this up away from me. That way the next set of cookies can be closer to me, and when I work on them, I'll have more control. I find that if I try and work too far away from my body, I don't have as much control over my icing. And so when you're decorating cookies, you want to take your time and do your best work. All right, so for this leprechaun, the ice cream cone upside down, we're going to think of this as the hat portion at the top. So imagine where the swirls kind of begin on that ice cream cone. That's where his beard is going to start. So I'm going to create a rim of his hat, of that leprechaun hat. It's a little bit of a bended line I made there. And then create the hat. All right, and then the portion below is going to be his long orange beard. There we go. So I created those areas and I'm done with the outlining stage. All right, so on your pot of gold, I know that the pot of gold could be like a black pot at the bottom. I'm going to make mine a green color just because I don't love to eat a lot of black icing on the cookie. I feel like it just makes your mouth so dark. So I'm going to create a pot. I'm going to bend my line just a little bit. There we go. And then at the top portion of the cookie, I'm going to make that white. It's gonna get covered up with gold sprinkles in a little bit. So I'm just making like a wavy white area on the top. Now, as you're looking at your cookie right now, it may not look exactly like the one I'm showing you in this video. The cookie cutter I ordered has not arrived yet, and it's coming soon. So we are making do with the shape we created. Yours have 2 little feet at the bottom. And what I'd like for you to do on your cookie is leave those little feet, the stand of the pot, just leave that alone right now. We'll add that portion after these lines dry a little bit. All right, so create those areas on your pot of gold. And then on your shamrock shake, okay, so picture all like the foamy whipped cream and all the deliciousness that is on top of the shamrock shake. We're going to make that area white to represent like whipped cream. So I'm just doing a lot of swirls, kind of like a cloud that you just did in that last one. Just a lot of that roller coaster wavy pattern. And then below it, I'm going to use the light green to represent that mint green look. And I'm just following along the shape of the cookie down below. And there, my friends, you have the first step complete. You did it. You outlined all your cookies. Great job. All right, so we're gonna move on to the second step, which is flooding. Why don't we shuffle our cookies around? Get those shamrocks back in front of you. Those lines have hardened just a little bit. They're gonna allow for a nice border for our flood icing. So we're gonna use the same icing for our flooding. We're just going to trim some of the bags a little bit more, especially for your largest shamrock. I highly recommend trimming that bag because it's such a large cookie that you want the icing to come out, I don't wanna say fast, like I don't want it to pour on your cookie, but you don't want it to be such a slow process that it starts to dry and crust over before it's finished. So I do like to trim my bags not right over my cookies. That way the little plastic part doesn't go on my cookie. Do that off to the side. And then for that cookie, I just want you to start squeezing that icing on. There is no particular way that is right or wrong to flood a cookie. You can work your way around the edge first. You can start in the middle first. You are just applying a lot of icing onto your cookie. You don't want to put such a thin amount of icing that you have to spread it out like butter on bread or something. You don't want it to be so thin that you have to do that. So squeeze on a bunch of icing, and once it looks like you have a lot of icing on your cookie, you can set your piping bag down, pick up a toothpick, and just start pushing your icing right up to the outline. At the top of your shamrock, peek over with your head. Make sure you have all of those little areas of cookie covered up. You don't want to see any cookie peeking through. And since it's such a big cookie, you do have to work your way all around this cookie until you're sure it's covered. And then in case any of the areas aren't quite smooth, what I like to do is just very gently holding it at the side, tap it on the table just a bit, and it gets those areas that are just a little bit peaky to settle down. There we go. Same thing with the next cookie. So I am going to, like I said before, I'm going to decorate these the way I did my example. So you can choose to do this in any other way you'd like. Don't feel you have to do it the same way I am. But on this light green one, I'm going to show you a technique called marbling. It's using, I guess it's not marbling per se, it's a wet on wet technique, I meant to say. If you have done a class with me before and you've done marbling, you could certainly be doing that on the shamrocks. That would look fun. I will show you a wet on wet technique using polka dots on this one. And as I work, I notice this bag is not coming out quite as fast as I want it to. So I just trimmed off a little bit more. There we go. So if yours is not coming out as fast as you'd like, it might be a good idea to just trim off a little bit more. It makes such a difference. All right, using a toothpick, push it right up to the edge. Sometimes all it needs is just a little nudge. Just want to cover up all of those little sneaky areas peeking through. So my flood icing is touching all of my outlines. All right. And then on that cookie, I'm going to use a different color. I'm going to use the darker green, and I'm going to create a series of polka dots. To do a polka dot, you squeeze the icing and then you pull up in one solid motion. I'm adding these polka dots while this icing is wet because it's going to dry as one solid surface in the background. So I'm just staggering the dots. If you like to add sprinkles, you could add sprinkles to this cookie too. There is just no limit on the creativity that you can use. I think I'm gonna add one more right down here on the stem. There we go. So this is all going to dry as one solid surface, and then I'll do some special touches in the very end when we do detailing. So that's as far as I'm gonna go with that cookie right now. Moving on to the rainbow. So on this one, let me see how fast this white comes out. I trimmed it well enough to be able to flood this section, but I think I'm gonna need to trim it just a little more so I can fill the cloud area. Yeah, so I'm just gonna trim it right off to the side. And then I'm gonna flood my cloud. If you love to use sprinkles, I think the cloud would also look really fun with sprinkles on it. Sprinkles will stick to the icing when it's wet. So if you do want to add sprinkles to any of these cookies, go ahead and add the sprinkles when the icing is wet. All right, so I put a lot of icing on there. I use my toothpick to just gently bring it up to the edge. All right, and then I'm gonna fill in my other spots on the rainbow. You can even use the tip of your bag to push the icing around. Maybe you've discovered that. Whichever method feels that you have more control, I'd like for you to use. These areas being small, it is a little bit easier to use the tip of your piping bag, kind of like a toothpick. There's this one little spot on this rainbow though that I want to use my toothpick and get right in this little crevice there. There we go. So that's as far as I'm going to go with this right now. And now I'm going to shuffle my cookies around. I'm going to very carefully push these cookies up out of the way. I'm not even going to pick those up because I don't want to damage that flood icing that I just worked so hard on. So push those cookies up out of the way so they can start to crust over and dry a little bit. All right, so let's work on our leprechaun next. You can fill in his hat first or his beard, totally up to you. So in your sprinkle cup, I don't know if you've taken the lid off to notice this yet. I really should have mentioned this, but I want to show you something because there's a special sprinkle in your gold container that I want you to know is meant for the leprechaun. So there's like a little nose, okay? So this little piece of royal icing is going to be his nose. So in case you see that and you're like, that's a huge sprinkle, that's so random. This is his nose. So we're just gonna set that aside for right now. Don't use it to sprinkle any of your cookies with. That's gonna be his nose. All right, here comes the leprechaun beard. Just love these bright colors of St. Patrick's Day. All right, so we covered up that whole cookie. That's gonna dry before we put on any parts of the leprechaun. I keep wanting to call him a shamrock. Before we put on his nose or put anything on him, we are just gonna set that aside. Now the pot of gold. I would like you to do the top portion of the pot of gold first because I feel it's easier to put our sprinkles on that top area and not risk it going down below when that icing is wet. So let's put some icing at the top of this pot of gold and then we'll put all those gold sprinkles on top. And then we'll do the bottom. And if at any point you find that you're feeling like you're racing because I'm maybe moving faster than you're working, please just press pause. I want this to be relaxing and fun for you. I don't want you to feel that you just can't catch up. So just pause the video. Take your time. All right, so I'm just going to apply a generous amount of these gold sprinkles at the top. I want to cover this whole area. I really don't want to see much white. That's my goal. I just want to cover up this whole area. I think we got on quite a bit. So anything that went in this area down below, I can just cover it up, but especially those larger gold discs, I'm just gonna brush those off. That way it doesn't create too much of a lumpy situation. There we go. Oops, I went to cover up a piece of white and it just slipped back. All right. So now I can fill in the bottom part of this pot. Apply a generous amount to this pot of gold. I wish I could peek through this camera and see how everybody's doing. I do hope that you're having fun and that you're learning some new things. I know you're going to be so proud of yourself in the end. You are creating your own cookies. I'm so excited to see them. I hope you'll share a picture with us in the end. All right. I also, on those little legs that you have on your cookies at the bottom, I want you to just fill in those little areas right now. I'm just going to add some little feet to my pot of gold. But on yours, on those like little feet on the stand, you can fill in that portion now too. So it's all green down below and has gold on top. We're gonna let that dry. We'll do some details to that in the final step. But we can move on to the shamrock shake now. And if you do like sprinkles and you want to add sprinkles to the top, that's what I'm going to do. You don't have to if you're not into sprinkles. But I like to do the sprinkle part of the cookie first. That way if there's any strays, it doesn't get onto areas that I don't want sprinkles. So apply a lot of icing and then add your sprinkles. Sprinkle it on. Can do as many or as few as you like. Okay. After the sprinkles are done, you can fill in that bottom area. I can practically smell the mint right now. I'm just imagining that minty taste that goes along with St. Patrick's Day. So after I put on a lot of icing, I'm gonna just gently push it up to the border. All right, so you just finished the flooding stage. Ideally, it would be awesome if you could step away from these cookies for like 5 minutes or so to allow them to crust over. That way, all of our details can go right on top and not risk sinking down into our flood icing. So why don't you just press pause, and in about 5 minutes, I'll meet you back here. All right, so we're gonna move on to the last step here, which is the detailing. This is where we just bring these cookies to life. If any of the bags are trimmed just so big that you know you trimmed off quite a bit, the icing's coming out in a really, really, wide sort of way. This is what this part is all about, rebagging our icing so that we can have more of a fine tip to do detailing with. So I gave you 2 bags. So what I'd like for you to do is think of what 2 colors you need or want to rebag. I know I cut my greens the biggest. So I'm going to rebag my greens for some of my details. And what I'm doing, let me walk you through this. I just trimmed off a big chunk of this bag. And off to the side, not right over my cookies, but right off to the side, place your old bag inside. And then just pull out all that icing. So you can have a fresh start. And then you can just tie it up. And now we have a fresh start. I'm gonna do the same thing to my light green. Maybe your white you trimmed too big and you wanna rebag that one. Go for it. I just wanna have as fine of a tip as possible on my colors for the final steps. All right. And then I'm gonna trim those just really small. I'm gonna show you some ideas on how you can detail them, but please use any ideas that you have in mind. I'm gonna shuffle my cookies around, bring those shamrocks up close again. They have dried the longest for me now, so I want those closest to me. Now on my shamrock, I'm gonna trim my black too, because I haven't trimmed my black yet. So on my shamrock cookie, I created a plaid pattern in the example, and so here's how you can do that. Notice I used 3 different colors on that. If you would like to try the plaid pattern too, I will show you the ropes. So I created a set of lines they're a little bit going diagonal on my shamrock. And when I start to space out my lines, I'm gonna try to take that same amount of spacing and keep going with it. If the cookie stops at some point, I'm just gonna lift up the bag and keep going. Just like that. Okay, while I have the black in my hand, I'm going to make the other set of lines. All right, so I'm gonna just have them go the opposite direction now. And this is how our plaid is going to come to life. I'm just spacing them apart. All right, so I chose that color. Next, I'm going to use the orange. And my orange is trimmed a little bit bigger than the black, and I actually really like that because I think that'll make it look interesting and unique. So I'm just going to do my orange lines right beside the black lines. Oops. So my line just broke, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just try to fix it. There we go. So you're just following along those first lines that you made. If moving in a certain direction is too tricky, like moving in this right upward motion, it's also fine to move your cookie. Move the cookie so it's comfortable for you. You want to work on the cookie in whatever direction it's most comfortable for you. And I'm gonna use my light green too. White or light green would both look really nice. You can go on either side. I think I'm gonna go on the other side of the black line with this. Because why not? We're just making a pattern. All right, so I went to the left of the black line, so I'm gonna apply that same logic here. Oops. And there we go. There's my plaid. I love that. All right, so for the next one, I created in my example a series of like hearts that went on top of the edges of my shamrock. I just saw a lot of hearts as I was decorating that cookie. And so that's what I'm going to do again with this. If you want to do something different, please do whatever you'd like as you detail it. But I am going to first suggest that if any of your bags get goopy on the end with icing, I like to wipe it off before I work. I just like to see the tip of my bag and have it come out as clean and nice as possible. So I kind of did this when I started. I imagined a center, and then I created hearts over each of these areas. And on this one, it really would be a good idea to spin it around. I think you can make hearts more successfully if you move your cookie around. Whatever works for you. I think we can do our best work and have the most control when we're working on it in the way that makes sense for us. There. So I made all the edges of my shamrock, and now I'm just going to highlight that stem. There we go, just like that. And then in the center, I put a little heart in the center. You can choose to put whatever you would like, maybe just leave it be, but I feel like it's just a nice finishing touch to have just a little something in the middle. There we go, there's a little heart. All right, so that shamrock is done. This part always makes me sad when we finish up our cookies. I know it's a happy thing, but it's also just, it's sad when things come to an end. All right, for the rainbow, I like to highlight the cloud on this one. I think it just brings more dimension, it calls attention to it. All right, so I just like hovered over, I did all those little areas. And then on that cloud, just because I want to have a little something else there, you can either put a little heart in the corner like I did. A smiley face would look really cute on there. You could really just put any number of things, but I'm going to do another little heart just to add a little pop of color. All right, so we just finished up those three. I'm very carefully going to shuffle my cookies closest to me again. Your sleeves can get messy if you try to reach across your body. Just nothing good comes from it. So always bring cookies closest to you, okay? All right, so on this little friend, we have that nose that we set aside, right? So what I'd like for you to do is imagine where the nose is going to go. It's gonna go just below his hat. So I'm gonna take a color. Any color is fine. Maybe we should use orange. Why don't you use orange? And here's why. In case any of this orange, we're going to pretend it's like glue. If any of it comes out from underneath, it will match the beard. I just dropped it down on that spot, and so gently, I'm not pushing hard, just so gently, just tap it down. And then I just kind of want to bring attention to the hat and highlight that area. Gives it a little bit of texture, helps bring it to life, I feel like. I'm just following along the shape of that hat. Just outlining the edge. See that there? And then we can create a band, that area where his hat has the little buckle. So I'm gonna have my black. I'm gonna create a band. You can make your band as thick as you want. I'm gonna make it a little thicker here. So I'm just creating like a rectangle area. And then I'm just gonna fill that in with black. I'm gonna let that dry just a little bit before I add a buckle to it. One thing I didn't do in my example that I wish I would have done is added like a little smile. I think a little smile on him off to the side would look so cute. So maybe you can look at the two examples and see which one you wanna do. But I just put this tiny little smile off to the side that I think is so sweet. So you can try it like that if you'd like. And I'm gonna remember to come back to this. I wanna add just a little simple white buckle in just a bit, or maybe a light green. I'm gonna think about it. I told you I don't like it when things come to an end, so I'm gonna come back to it. On the pot of gold, I just created a simple little design in the middle. So maybe a little bit symbolic of like a horseshoe. I just wanted a little something to go here. So it's like I made a U with this little swirly on the outsides. And then on the inside of that, I created a shamrock. Now, here's how I want to teach you to make a shamrock. It's really just a series of hearts. So start with one little heart. It's like a V. Start with one in the middle. And then very carefully just twist your cookie. Make another one off to the side. And then twist it the other direction. Okay. And then we can just make a little stem in the middle. And if any of your areas don't look like they're symmetrical or match, you can always just go over it with a tiny bit more icing. But as you can see, this is why I wanted to trim my bags to have like a finer tip again. That way I could do some fine details like this. All right. And now for the shamrock shake. Let me find my scissors. Oh, here we go. All right, so I am gonna trim my light green just a touch because I want to highlight the edge of my mug. I wanna follow along that. It gets lost a little bit in the background if you don't bring attention to it like this. And then I'm going to create some ridges on it. I feel like a mug has some ridges. Like that. A little handle area right there. You can practically taste it. All right. And then I think I'm going to use this light green right here for this leprechaun. I'm going to put a little buckle. I'm going to make a rectangle on top of that band on the hat. Go over it a time or two until I'm happy with the shape of it. And I think he's so adorable. I think he is so cute. I think one last touch I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the beard, highlight the outline of him. Oh my gosh, he is so cute. I can't even stand it. All right, you guys. Well, I hope you had so much fun decorating cookies with me today. Just a few pointers about storage. These cookies will ideally sit in the box tonight to dry. I feel like they taste their very best the next day after they've dried. But of course, if you want to enjoy one today, there's no harm in that. I just think they're at like their perfect taste tomorrow. So put them in the box that your kit came with. You don't have to freeze them, you don't have to refrigerate them, just room temperature is fine. Just let them hang out in the box overnight. Our cookies do not contain nuts or tree nuts. We don't use any nuts or tree nuts here at the cookie shop. So your cookies are safe to enjoy if you have a nut allergy. And please share your final results with us. We love it when you tag us on social media so we can see your beautiful creations. And we always are coming up with new kits, so be sure to check back for the next one. Thanks for joining us today. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Bye-bye.